world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Thursday, the 11th of June, year of our Lord 2026. Well, we're going to take a look today at Trump's Pride Month war, as I said before, is LGBT plus TQ plus. We're losing gas badly, and Trump has got us into a quagmire plus a lot of other things, and he is escalating this yet again in supposed retaliation for a collision between a helicopter and a drone. He's going after their civilian infrastructure. And of course, Tony's going to be joining us today. We have what is shaping up to be the perfect setup for gold. You think the U.S. government's in a dilemma in Iran? Well, the Fed's economic straits are worse than what's going on in Hormuz. And of course, AI has been caught in a lot of traps as well. And people have been falsely identified. All kinds of issues are happening as they are rolling out the intelligence aspect of this. And I don't mean it from smarts. I mean the artificial intelligence as in spying on us. That kind of godlike power. And we'll take a look at a horrific attempted beheading in UK and the reaction of the people there. So let's begin with Trump, and he says he has to respond to this. This is an act of aggression, apparently. He's launched military strikes against Iran after the downing of a helicopter. Again, like Israel, we attack first. If you defend yourself, you don't have a right to exist. That is an unforgivable outrage. And so the U.S. military and the Trump administration is calling this a self-defense attack. How is this a self-defense attack? And how is it equitable to have, if you attack somebody with your military, and they are attacking, as well as Iran, both of them now are attacking non-combatant commercial vessels because of their mutual blockades that are happening. That is unjust on both sides. Nevertheless, he says that this is an act of Iranian aggression. I think we're the ones who started the war. We're the ones there with the military. And we've heard this argument from Israel and Lebanon, for example, over and over again. They attack Lebanon, and then in response, they create an organization to push back against them, Hezbollah. Oh, well, now you are terrorists. We hear this over and over again. And there isn't a proportionality in terms of attacking Iranian military outlets. No, what they're doing is they're attacking Iranian civilian infrastructure. So the Iranian foreign minister said, well, if you want to be safe, leave our region. And again, the crew was successfully rescued. Nobody was hurt. How did that happen? Well, as Trump was pointing out, he said, it's really strange. You know, this drone hit right between the two pilots and didn't explode. Yeah, because it wasn't an attack. It was a collision that was happening there. And yet this is full on something that has to be answered. It has to be an escalation. Because understand, Trump was lying to us when he was talking about how the peace talks, the agreement, the ceasefire, whatever, was in its final moments. The final throes of it is what he said, which is a strange way to put it. But he says, yeah, we're getting close, 2 or 3 days. Well, we knew that was a lie. So how does he walk that lie back? Well, we were attacked, ruthlessly attacked. We got to do something about this. War Pete warned that Iran faces a wave of U.S. strikes. He said there'll be bombs dropping on key facilities. Again, civilian targets. Hegseth said the airstrikes are intended to pressure Iran into negotiations rather than to trigger a broader conflict, which is what Israel wants. So yeah, we really want to end it. If you believe that, I got a bridge to sell you. CENTCOM will be busy tonight because we're going to be hitting Iran hard. He loves his work, doesn't he? No, Israel wants to keep this going. You know, we invade. How dare you to respond to anything, even if it is something that is apparently accidental. The events threaten to escalate tensions and risk chances of a ceasefire. Trump has repeatedly promised the ceasefire was imminent. yet we know that's not the case. To the collision of the U.S. Apache helicopter with an Iranian drone, Trump said that Iran was culpable, although it's not clear whether it was intentional. Tehran has deliberately denied targeting the aircraft, denied deliberately targeting it. A research fellow, a German think tank in Berlin, told Newsweek that regardless of how much truth there is in Iran's claim, he said it signals that they don't want this to become an excuse for a new round of intensified conflict. But Bibi does, Hegseth does, and so Trump does, because he's their goy. Iran, in turn, launched retaliatory drone attacks against American bases in the region. And again, this is a retaliation for the attacks on the water infrastructure that is there. What is clear is that neither the U.S. nor Iran has any interest at this stage to return to a full-scale war, said the analyst at the think tank in Berlin. I don't know about that. Maybe that's true for Iran and for the U.S. It's not true for Israel, and what Israel wants is what matters. So Trump said that Iran has taken too long to negotiate a deal, and now they'll have to pay the price. So again, what is this really about? Is it about the helicopter? Is it about the fact that he couldn't get a deal through, so he's got to cover his behind, the master negotiator, the deal maker who can't make a deal? And so many people are asking if this was all a mistake. What they agree on is the fact that an Apache helicopter gunship was struck by an Iranian unmanned aerial vehicle near the coast of Oman. And other messaging from Tehran suggested the helicopter was not deliberately hit. And again, as I said, Trump, in terms of saying, yeah, it wasn't really a big deal, he said. The pilots were not seriously injured. This thing hit between where the two pilots were, but it didn't explode. Really wasn't an attack. But I'm going to do it anyway because my boss said so. So Trump said he'll be attacking Iran hard again today. He said, told Fox, I may keep going with these strikes. I don't know. I'm not really sure what I'm doing. I got to wait till somebody tells me what to do, I guess. Trump said Iran took too long to negotiate, will now have to pay the price. How many days do we keep this running for a midair collision? That's the question, because it's not really about anything other than trying to keep this war going. Trump posted that he had directed our great U.S. military to execute a secret mission to support oil tankers and other commercial ships through the Strait of Hormuz. Of course, the mission wasn't that secret if we discussed how the U.S. military was helping ships get across the strait a week ago, said Zero Hedge. And they did. They had an article about that a week ago. Trump said this effort has resulted in more than 100 million barrels of oil making its way through the strait and into the open market. More than 200 commercial ships have safely traveled through the strait. Okay, well, that's about equivalent to what in normal times, before Trump threw his wrench into the global machinery, that's about a day and a half's worth. And that's over a week. So over the last week, they've been able to get what used to be a day and a half's worth of oil through the area. It may buy some time in terms of what people are talking about, the tank bottom that is rapidly approaching to us. And yet it's maybe too little too late. Oil surged, jumping by more than $1 after Trump vowed to strike Iran again. It is every day. It's just up and down based on what this guy is saying. And he's just a liar. It's just beyond me to understand how people react like that. I guess they're reacting like that because they're thinking somebody else is going to react like that. I guess it's the greater fool theory, the greater reactionary fool. It's also clear that Tehran feels that it has to assert strong red lines immediately and without hesitation if it is to survive this now several months-long military confrontation. A longtime regional war correspondent and analyst said it's a volatile situation with no stable political exit, as peace is far from being achieved while Lebanon and Gaza are still under attack. Who is it that is doing that? This whole thing is all about Israeli aggression. Gaza, Lebanon, those are the key issues. They're the ones telling Trump not to do a deal. They want to keep this going. They want a nuclear attack on Iran, and they'll not be satisfied with anything other than that. If you want to take away nuclear weapons, you need to take them away from Israel. That's the real issue. The most dangerous thing is that every side believes they can control the escalation. However, a repeated incident can erode restraint, and if talks collapse completely, this controlled escalation could widen into a much larger conflict. History has shown that if one strike crosses the red line, the attacks can spiral out of control. Well, that's just common sense. So again, vital water infrastructure was reportedly struck in Iran. So we go after civilian infrastructure because of a collision there. They say that they have to do something because, and self-defense of a collision. President Trump is readying new strikes on Iranian power plants and bridges as well. He said they have to pay the price. Well, again, the U.S. and Israeli Zionists would love for Iran to take the bait and to attack. And they would love for them to take the bait and attack the U.S. civilian infrastructure as well. Think about that. It's not that difficult with an open border. They don't have to have intercontinental ballistic missiles anymore. And by the way, if the Iranians are too smart to do that, and I think they are, then it's likely that Israel or the U.S. will do a false flag attack to boost their flagging support for this unnecessary war. Maybe they'll do it sometime around the 4th of July and try to tie that into a lot of flag waving. So again, Trump says of Iran, they have been completely defeated. Well, if they're completely defeated, then how did you have that collision that you now try to make into an act of aggression? He said, the bully of the Middle East is dead. Well, no, that's not true. It's not true of Iran, and it certainly isn't true of the real bully of the Middle East that has attacked everybody around it, Israel. Retaliation is not necessary for what happened with this, but it is what they want. He said an Iranian drone hit the helicopter lodged between the two pilots, bursting into flames but not exploding. So again, it wasn't an attack, but it was a collision. Trump just isn't really good at lying. You know, he does it all the time. With so much practice, you would think he would get better at lying. And so they carried out what they call self-defense strikes against this mid-air collision. Just beyond belief. Up until Wednesday, the president had still lied about efforts to reach a deal with Iran, saying they were in the final throes. So again, he needs cover for his lies, and he needs to follow Bibi's orders. So, as I said, they attacked water infrastructure there. The headline says, and it's a headline from the Hindu Times, water cut off for thousands of Iranians after U.S. strikes. And yet it was 20,000 residents of the region. Thousands, it was tens of thousands it's cut off for. J.D. Vance, meanwhile, is very confident that this is going to end in a year. Think about this. You had Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin. I've played the clips. This isn't a quagmire. This isn't going to go on forever. This is going to be just a few days, maybe a few weeks. Remember at the very beginning of this, they started to settle in on a time frame. Well, maybe 3 to 4 weeks, right? Then they said, well, maybe 8 weeks. And now here we are, 100 days into this. And J.D. Vance says, oh, yeah, I'm sure this will be done in a year. In a year. Truly is amazing how these people continually lie about all this stuff and nobody calls them out on it. So not a problem at all, is it? It is a quagmire plus. So long as we keep this thing anchored to the core mission, said JD, to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon, it's not going to become a quagmire. Wait a minute. I thought the goal was to have regime change. Wasn't that it? And then the goal became nuclear. But then you had Trump say, well, yeah, truthfully, their nukes are encapsulated. They can't do anything about it. And we got eyes on the site with satellites, and I can read the names on their lapels. They all say Muhammad. But he says, it's all encapsulated. We need to take that nuclear dust out of there. But it really is just a PR event. So we're keeping this going for another year for a PR event. Is that right? Just a PR event. And so JD, by the way, was doing this interview as part of his hype of his new book that he calls Communion, Finding My Way Back to Faith. Interesting that it doesn't say back to God. Tell us about your faith. Tell us about your faith in Trump and his unjust war. The right is twisting Jesus every bit as much as Tallarico is. It really is amazing. They've all created their little political gods that they worship. And they're all pretending that their little political gods are named Jesus. Sorry, they're not. Not at all. Furthest thing from it. So he was also, as part of this interview, he reacted to a question about Israel spying on us, our greatest ally. And his thing was he didn't deny it outright, which is what the White House did. This is how we see their lies. They can't keep their stories straight. Even the same guy can't keep his same story straight. Through the same day or through a couple of days, they start contradicting themselves, let alone other people in the administration. And so he wants to say, well, the White House had officially denied it, but he says, well, we have different goals. Our goals don't exactly line up. And so you're going to have some things like, so he kind of indirectly confirms the fact that our greatest ally is spying on us and escalating all of this. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk about what's going on with AI. It's amazing stories here about artificial intelligence. Before we do, I want to get some of the comments here. Got a couple of them from Gard Goldsmith, Liberty Conspiracy. Good to see you, Gard. He says, by the way, Trump and willing U.S. military accomplices hit another Indian tanker a few hours ago. 2 of them in 2 days, 3 men dead. I have a big problem with that. As Trump said, we're basically pirates. Very profitable. It's good to be the pirate king, I was going to play Pirates of Penzance, but I don't think most people get the cultural reference for it. Anyway, Gard also says, somebody asked Hegseth about hitting the water in Iran, and he attacked the questioner for merely asking about what is a clear war crime. Yeah, we attack water infrastructure and power plants and bridges, and even worse, we attack people who are in the water, shipwrecked, who are not combatants. We do that in Venezuela. This is what the American military has become. It is beyond shameful. It is criminal what they are doing. Absolutely criminal. We have criminal wars of aggression fought in criminal ways. What do you expect when you got a crime regime that is there? We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we'll be right back.
Making sense common again. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Whether you're feeling like the blues or bluegrass, APS Radio has you covered. Check out a wide variety of channels on our app at apsradio.com.
Welcome back. Tony's going to be joining us in just a couple of minutes. I may wait on this artificial intelligence stack until he gets here. But I want to thank, in the meantime, people who have sent us checks for June. Stacy P., Timothy W., James F., Gary B., Teal C., Peter G., Lois L., Ronald C., Joel B., Dale L., Matthew H., Tom and Nancy, thank you very much. Lloyd P., Eric O., HD and NC, and Marty K. And also Landon, thank you for the gift that you sent. I appreciate that. And I want to put out a prayer request. This is from someone who also sent a check, Stacy, and her mother, who she's very close to, of course, and is suffering from AFib. And so she asked for prayer for her mother. And I think it makes a big difference if we have a lot of people who are praying for someone. I've seen this over and over again. I don't know how prayer works exactly. I just know that God tells us to pray. And I've seen it work, and I've seen it work amazingly in many different times. And a lot of those times, there's an interesting book that was put out by, it's called The Case for Miracles. And it was, who's the guy who did Case for Christ and the Case for...
Lee Strobel?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm starting to get these little short circuits of brain cells. I should have been able to remember Lee Strobel. But he did one, Case for Miracles. And one of the interesting cases that he had was this person who was literally at death's door, and her body was all shriveled up. It was absolutely amazing, the condition that she was in. But they put out over the radio, out of Moody Radio, I think it was, which was a Christian show, they put out a prayer request. They had a lot of people who were praying for her, and all of a sudden, she just pulled out of it, and arms and legs that had been drawn up for years. She just got up and walked across the room, and the medical people couldn't even believe it was her. They thought it was something else. One of them thought it was a ghost. It was like straight out of the New Testament. And it truly was amazing. But, there'd been a lot of people who had been praying for her, but when it was individually over a period of time, but when it was a lot of people together, it had an effect. I don't know exactly what is happening in the spiritual world, but I know that God tells us to do it. That's enough of a reason to do it, and he tells us to pray for each other. So I think it's very important for us to do that. Let me also thank some of the people who have contributed on Cash App as well. Going back to June, we have Francisco, Dustin, and Robert and Dave. Thank you so much, all of you, for your support, and we appreciate that. And I think we have updated the gas gauge to about 3/8 is where we are right now. Someone asked where the gas gauge is. If you go to davidknight.news, that shows you where the programs are, where the live programs are, where the archives are of the video as well as the audio. It also gives you links and ways that you can support us if you would like to. So all of that is there, as well as the gas gauge. You'll find that all at davidknight.news. Well, do we have Tony with us yet? I've got a couple more people I need to thank here, by the way. These were tips that came in at the end of the show yesterday that I didn't catch. Marky Mark in New Jersey, thank you very much. He said, unfortunately, South Carolina still has open primaries. Democrats can vote in the GOP primary and vice versa. That's why Lindsey Graham wins the GOP primary all of the time. I don't know. It's our elections are a mess, quite frankly. And as I look at what is happening, and we're going to talk about this later with when we get into artificial intelligence, but one of the people that is just not getting the attention that she deserves in a negative way for what she is doing to enable the government use of artificial intelligence is Marsha Blackburn, our senator here in Tennessee. She is so far out ahead in the GOP primary with all the money that she's got. I've interviewed Monty Fritz, and I think Monty is a great guy. He's an honest guy, but Marsha, she is all about mandates. We need to call her Mandate Marsha. And Blackburn is setting everybody up with these mandates for digital ID, for biometric ID, for permission to use the internet and all the rest of these things. She is the point person for the Trump administration. She's the one who's introducing these bills that they put together and has done this over and over again. So I can't even imagine having a governor who despises the 10th Amendment as much as she does. It just blows my mind to think about what's going to happen with it. So, yeah, in a way, it's going to be another Lindsey Graham situation. And because of the power of the political parties, nobody is opposing her. Nobody wants to get in the way of the established rulers that are there. You don't want to oppose the Speaker of the House or the President or somebody who is connected to all of them. It is just amazing to watch people who typically are conservatives just roll over and die. That's why Monty Fritz is a different kind of guy. He's not interested in a career in politics. He's interested in doing the right thing. And so if you live in Tennessee, please think about that. We don't have the primaries until August, I think, here in Tennessee. I'm going to have to get him on a second time. The other part of the problem is he's just too nice a guy to criticize other people. I'm not nearly as nice as Monty is when it comes to criticizing people. I'm afraid I sometimes can get a little bit too nasty. I look back and say, did I really say that? Star Barkley, thank you very much for the tip. That was yesterday. I said, here's a bit for the gas gauge. Thank you for everything and peace. Well, I really do appreciate that. Do we have Tony yet? Okay, well, let me read you this first article because I thought it was a great metaphor for AI. I was going to save it till I got into the AI stuff, but it's actually kind of a funny article as well. Disaster strikes when a meme coin pays a man to tattoo the name of the meme coin on his forehead. But in their bribe, they set these things up as like bounties. They misspelled the name of their meme coin. And so, again, I think this is really a metaphor for what the tech companies are getting all of us to do, in a sense, the way they're trolling us and controlling us. They finally got somebody in India to take them up on it, but this is something that's been going on for a little while. It is a crypto marketplace called Pump.fun. You might want to think twice about getting crypto coins from a place that's called Pump. I mean, that might be a clue that it is pump and dump, which it really is. They've launched an extremely dubious new bounty marketplace that feels like it was directly inspired by the dystopian sci-fi TV show Black Mirror, says Futurism. So they allow crypto holders to throw money at desperate people to do humiliating things. For example, it was used to pay a black man to cover himself in watermelon while repeating the phrase, "I'm your friend, the watermelon man," 10,000 times. How long does it take to say a phrase like that 10,000 times? I don't know. I should time how long it takes to say it once and multiply that out. That had to last for a very long time. They even had one for $690,000 for somebody to attempt suicide. I mean, this is really getting crazy. And so the one that is the key here is the tattoo of the forehead. And there are several of those bounties that are out there. This particular one was a man named Aravu in southern India. He accepted a bounty that was offering about $2,600 to tattoo above his eyes on his forehead, dollar booty work, B-O-U-T-Y work. And he documented it in a video, and it was quite painful, as tattoos are. But I mean, this was on his forehead where you have a lot of sensation. And so they said, yes, in case you're wondering, it should have read bounty work, but they left out the N. But he did it exactly the way they put it up there. And so it created a bit of an issue. And as he had the misspelled directions, eventually it inspired that crypto community there to launch an actual meme coin that was named Booty Work. And it got enough attention that Bootywork token soared, reaching a market cap of $373,000 within just hours. And a familiar scam, a dubious meme coin, attracts enormous amounts of hype, only to come crashing down hard, leaving those who didn't get out in time holding the bag. Yeah, that's kind of what the name of the place is. It's pump and dump. They have fun when they're pumping it, but when it gets dumped, it's not really any fun, I guess. But pump.fun, that's what this is all about. So they make this mistake, and everybody thinks this is great. Let's have a real meme coin, because there's no value to them whatsoever. And it goes up to $373,000. He managed to get in on the scheme himself, earning just shy of $29,000. And actually, it wasn't that he got into it and got out on time. It was that the people who were pumping and dumping this had a little bit of pity on him. And the people who kickstarted it gave him some of the fees as a reward for his dedication. So they kicked in $29,000, which is 10 times what he was willing to put a tattoo permanently on his forehead for anyway. In short, pump.fun has effectively put a price on humiliation. It's the kind of development you'd expect from a dystopian sci-fi flick set in a world where inequality and moral decay have become ubiquitous. That is exactly what we're looking at. It's a perfect metaphor, isn't it, for artificial intelligence? Well, Tony is on the line now. Let's just jump over to him. Actually, I'll put on just a really short break, and we'll be right back with Tony.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
All right, welcome back. And Tony, I'm sure you saw this. Gold price could triple if the 1970s bull market pattern holds, says one person who's looking at it. He said, I went back and I looked at the 1970s, and I've been doing a lot of this, the 1973 OPEC oil embargo, and how is the 2026 Trump oil embargo very much like this, and what is happening with gold? And he said, they're lining up exactly. He said there's like a 95% correlation, even to the extent that as gold started taking off and then it drops right about the same point that we've seen right now. What about that?
That's a really interesting correlation. And, you know, it's funny. If you look at all the factors, the economic factors that, you know, gold crashed basically in the last 48 hours with just major downturns from where we were just a few months ago. And this was, I think, this is the selling off and the consequences of data that has emerged. And it's interesting, if you reverse engineer this, it's really ridiculous. So you see the headlines yesterday was like all the CPI data, and the inflation's worse than all the experts thought. And so all of that is translating into, well, the central banks are going to either hold or raise rates. So the European Central Bank went up 25 basis points, David. And so the market said, well, then gold's in a bear market and we're going to sell off. Well, let's think about that. That means that the central banks know that inflation is so bad that they're going to have to either maintain or raise rates. But if they address the economic consequences, they're going to have to lower rates and expand the currency supply. So that's inflation. So either way, it's inflation. So it makes the price of gold go down.
Yeah,
that's just basically insanity at some point. So I watched all these numbers and I said, I'm going to back the truck up. So even in all liquidity that I had yesterday, I was just watching the trades.
Yeah.
And I'm locking in trades with the trading floor and just pulling anything that I had that was liquid, I was putting into gold. Because again, think about what that says. It's like inflation is so bad that the central banks are going to have to do something about it, which they really can't. And you and I both know this because if you read that article that you're talking about, correlating to the 1970s and what happened to gold from 71 to 79, there was, the issue of us going off the gold standard. But if you look at the world today, and he mentioned all the currencies are fiat. So back then, we started that movement. That was us. That was Nixon in 71. We led the charge to take the rest of the world into the fiat currency system. The last one to leave the metallic backing system was the Swiss in 2002.
Yeah.
So everything is linked up, and there's 56 or 57 times more currency on Earth today than there was in 1980. So it's a massive, increase in the money supply. So all of that to go back to say, you see a lowering of the gold prices and a sell-off based off the fact that they're literally facing an existential crisis because of inflation. So that makes no sense. But that's how irrational the markets are. The markets are completely irrational, David. And I think that's good for all of us, because if you and I know that the fundamentals and everything that we talk about when I come on weekly is that, look, central bank gold buying, 36,000 tons of gold held by central banks. The last time that was that high was Bretton Woods in 1944, David. So, I mean, it makes
They know
no
what's
sense.
happening. They know that we're in a fourth turning type of situation like this. They understand. You talk about the fact the inflation numbers were higher than they expected. And yet when you look at the core inflation, the core CPI, it excludes food and energy. How can you justify that? That's what's the two things that are exploding. We're going to ignore those two things, and yet still, even throwing those out, inflation was higher than they'd expected. And then when you look at other things, you talked about the central banks. He said, that is something that is different as well. He said, the central bank holdings and what they were doing in terms of buying and selling was very different. They don't have any wiggle room. There's really not anything they can do, because right now, our federal government's debt is 80 times larger than it was at that point in time. At that point in time, it was $500 billion. Now we're closing in on $40 trillion. And so when you look at the leverage that the Federal Reserve has, they don't have any leverage. Paul Volcker went in and he raised the interest rate up to 20% coming from the Fed at one point. They don't have that kind of ability anymore. Because they have so much money that they have to pay as interest on the debt. That's one of the reasons why Trump is so adamant that they've got to cut interest rates, is so that he can make the payments. How would they make the payments if they were to raise the interest rates by 5 to 6 times, right? Because right now the interest payments are about as big as our bloated defense budget, our record defense budget. So where are they going to get the money for another 5 or 6 Pentagon budgets? Just overnight. Of course, they can't do that. They would have to borrow it. If they borrow it, more money's like that kind of magnitude in order to pay off the debt, that doesn't make any sense. Nobody's going to make that kind of a loan to them. And it just put us in a death spiral if they did.
Yeah, currency creation is debt.
Yeah.
And, you grew up around this. We used to have discussions on budgetary matters and the deficit. That used to be a thing. I mean, politically, like it used to be talked about. There used to be, it was a subject matter that was discussed and worried about. And I think it was like muscle memory from a time when we did have a monetary discipline, or at least the semblance of one, from, let's say, from 45 to 71. I mean, it was still talked about. I mean, that was the history of the United States. We had budgetary concerns, and there was muscle memory for a long time. They stopped doing that after a while. I mean, I think the peak time was probably the 90s and then it started to trail off after that. And you had people like Ron Paul talk about, now it's just a free for all. And you mentioned the pump.fun deal. And I've talked about this, like the meme coins. It really is a symptom of a disease of fake, if you really want to get like philosophical about money and what fiat currency has created, it's so degenerate. Like it creates and people, I mean, at the end of the day, they're trying to grow their whatever their wealth is. They're gambling because so many things are blocking us from actually having real production and wealth and prosperity. And the main thing is just the uncertainty of the currency. I mean, when you were a kid, no, there wasn't commercials on investing. Like there wasn't, not every 5 commercials, like, it's like if you're Fox News or one of the cable networks is going to be about whatever investment product or whatever. There wasn't IRAs, there wasn't 401ks, there wasn't any of those things until the mid 70s. And that was because we had such bad runaway inflation after we went off the gold standard. Everybody knew, anybody in the know understood what was going to happen with the dollar after you did that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That where we are now is just worlds away.
Again, you look at this pumped up fun, and to me, it kind of encapsulates what's wrong with all this technocracy and these guys who've gotten ridiculously rich off of this stuff. A bunch of people, I don't know how old they are, but they act like they're a bunch of spoiled teenagers. You're going to pay poor people to humiliate themselves and put tattoos on their heads, and you can't even get the words that you want on their forehead right. I mean, that's that's the most amazing thing about it. A bunch of spoiled rich kids who can't even spell the word correctly, right? They don't even care. And then they take that mistake and they pump that up to a fortune. It's just amazing. They just keep getting away with it over and over again. You're talking about muscle memory of when budgets mattered and that type of thing. I remember when I was a kid back in the early 1960s, and I'd watch Senator Everett Dirksen. And this was a guy who sounded, with every statement that he made, he sounded like it was his last breath. He's always breathless. Well, he was the one who said $1 billion here and $1 billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. He was a real fiscal hawk. He's about the last one I remember. And I think he does, he took his last breath, and we haven't had anybody like him since then.
No. And that's, again, it's like a throwback. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
talks about it anymore. But if you just really if you look at the mathematics and debt to GDP, it's interesting. I think in when you were a kid, the 1960s, about 35% of debt to gross domestic product. And that's pretty steady throughout U.S. history, sometimes 20, 30. World War II obviously spiked. World War II was a big spike. It was about 120, but it went back down. And you look at the debt, but then you look at the numbers. You say, well, what was the actual debt total? You mentioned earlier, like the beginning of the 70s, it was like $500 billion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you get to the end of the 70s, it's $1 trillion. Oh, okay, well, you're at $1 trillion, so it takes you 200 years to get there. I was just reading the article and a little blurb on Gold Telegraph, and it's 39 trillion at this point. And you've talked about it hitting 40 probably this year. I think
I think it'll hit in the fall if you look at it.
Yeah,
I calculate out how fast it was going up, and I don't see it slowing down in terms of rate increase. It's going to hit sometime in September, I predict, because I don't think they're going to slow down any of this stuff. It truly is amazing.
Yeah, there's no fixing that. And the debt isn't real. It's not that we have to wrestle with who we owe. We bankrupted ourselves. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Basically at the end of the day, we create inside. The calls are coming from inside the house. It's an inside job.
Mm-hmm.
But the numbers don't lie. I mean, there's liars use numbers. The numbers are out there. The math is just what it is. And
Mm-hmm.
so you can, all this temporary stuff. And it's funny because I follow gold, silver, Bitcoin every single day, all throughout the day. It's funny. It's like they just pronounce the death of things. Oh, I guess the gold and silver bull runs over. I mean, it must, what a fluke that was, and I'm thinking, okay, but at the end of the day, I mean, what's going on with your currency? It's not like it's not a static thing. It doesn't have stasis. It just doesn't stay in the same place. And if you look at what they're going to have to do, David, I mean, at the end, they can talk about being hawks all they want on interest rates,
Mm-hmm.
but if you see,
It's a joke.
like the true economic data, like the average American, like I've seen people send me stuff. They're like, look at these videos of people at the grocery store,
Mm-hmm.
putting things back. And like, I can't really afford that extra thing of coffee. I can't afford, the name brand condiments or whatever, like, it's just crazy that there's so much happening with, what, the pundits are saying we're in this, the economy's doing great or whatever. And you just look at the real data and what's happening to actual Americans. They can't afford things. I mean, I see that in my business. I'm on the front lines of what's wrong with our currency and what's wrong with the system. It's not well.
Yeah.
And the gas prices certainly are leading the charge, but all of that was there before. I mean, some of this stuff that's saying that, the data on inflation is as worse as it's been since 22. Well, how did we get there in 22 in the first place? You know, the consequences of what, even going back to the lockdowns, you know, the consequences are still not fully in play from what happened then, let alone now.
That's
you know,
right.
even the energy stuff, David. So,
And as Jeffrey Tucker pointed out, he said, you know, we have had almost every quarter since 2020, we have been in a recession. And he goes, or, you know, negative growth or whatever. And so he says, you know, typically it's like, you know, 2 or 3 quarters in a row that's recession. Well, we passed that a long time ago. And that is the initial shock that Trump gave to everything. You know, this article, it was an interview with Jeff Clark. He's publisher of the Gold Advisor. And he said, I charted the correlation between our current gold bull market and the one from the 1976 to the peak in 1980. He said, believe it or not, the correlation coefficient between these two bull markets is 95%. And there's a reason for that. You know, when you look at all this, what Trump has done to energy is really worse than what happened with OPEC in 1973. I've been saying this from the very beginning, and that kind of price inflation is baked into it. And yet what they do, they exclude that. They exclude energy. They exclude food. And it's not just the economy stupid, it's energy and food prices stupid. And it's stupid to exclude that stuff. People are stupid to believe the CPI numbers that they put out when they exclude that. He said at this particular period in the 1970s, bull market, gold crashed. It crashed and then it immediately rebounded. And I guess that's happening now. He said, gold is crashing. We're matching it. It's almost tick for tick alignment between what happened in the 1970s. He said if the correlation continues to hold, gold would have to nearly triple from current levels to match the full magnitude of what happened from 1976 to 1980. And again, all of that was set in motion by the OPEC oil embargo and the energy spike that happened in that. So it is interesting. He said the decline remains smaller than the 30% correction that happened in the 2008 financial crisis or the 28% drop during the 2020 pandemic shock. And so, you know, he's making like you said, you back the truck up when you saw this price happen. It is, you know, when you look at the long-term trends, there's not a single thing that has changed except to get worse. We look at all the fundamentals that are there. He also questioned how aggressively the Fed can tighten monetary policy. And again, he said they can't afford to tighten it that much. When you look at what Paul Volcker did, as I said, he raised the interest rates to 20%. Right now, the Fed's interest rate is 3.5%. They can't do that. They would not be able to make the payments on the $40 trillion debt because, like I said before, it was only $500 billion at that point in time. Now it is $40 trillion, 80 times larger. It's just insane. The numbers are astronomical. It's hard to get a grasp on them. You can only understand a little bit about what is happening, the magnitude of the problem, if you look at it comparatively to what was there before.
Well, I think the difference, and I agree with the thesis, I think a lot of the correlations add up between this 1970s with stagflation and the OPEC oil embargo and all of that, and even just the free fall from going off the Bretton Woods Agreement and going off the gold standard. I believe all of that correlates, except it's worse. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, if you look at the chart, you look at the history, and we hit 1980, the things that Paul Volcker did worked. I mean, it at least in theory, right? They worked for the time. He raised interest rates. You say take it to the teens or to 20%, and it contracted the money supply and it stabilized inflation. Of course, the debt was only $1 trillion, and you know, we were still the hegemonic, dominant monetary power in the world, and so it did for a while stop things, and gold went down and silver crashed and all of that. And then there was the tech boom of the 80s and, you know, Reaganomics and Art Laffer and the Laffer curve, all that stuff. There was a temporary, but there's not going to be a Laffer curve. There's not going to be Reaganomics. There's not whatever. When this ends, David, like that cycle or whatever, if the correlation goes to from 76 to 80 in our timeline, let's say we're going to take it to 2030, there's nothing after that. Like it's just more debt. And there's not like you add in AI, which AI has sucked, you know, a lot of the liquidity out of the room, gone from Bitcoin and other places. Yeah. Oil right now is doing a very similar job. people are chasing the fastest horse in the race. Are trying to get behind that.
And the daily speculation about what Trump is going to do with the war. That's the most amazing thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And the schizophrenia of that. And so I just look at the metrics and I go, okay, well, I'm bullish on real hard assets. I'm bullish on commodities simply because there's no escaping the damage done in this. And even the article includes it. It's all the currencies on earth.
Yeah.
Are fiat.
That's right.
And so they have to debase themselves. And so even if, Jerome Powell raised interest rates faster than Paul Volcker, he raised them faster, but he only raised them 25 basis points at a time, where Paul Volcker was going, from, 5%, 7, 10, he was going up. He did it. Jerome Powell did it faster, but you're right. It's like to really wrangle in the amount of monetary debasement that's been done is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be able to do that because eventually they're going to look around and they're going to be faced with a crisis of, a collapsing economy. They're going to have to promise liquidity injections, which is, again, the irrationality of I'm looking at the screen right now. Gold's at 4,076 an ounce, which is still mind blowing to me coming from everything when I've worked around gold when it was $1,200 an ounce or less. So it's mind bending to me. However, the market will tell you that we're, gold's selling off and we're in a bear market because of that data, because inflation's so bad, gold went down. Okay, let me see if I can process that. But that's the irrationality of the market. That's why when I just know long term and looking at everything that's happening, you're not hurting yourself owning physical precious metals in the face of this. I don't care what any commentator says.
I look at this and it's absolutely. Here's another article: Gold market exhales as U.S. CPI rises roughly in line with expectations. Yeah, it went up. It went up faster than they thought, but it's not that far out of line. It's like, but you cooked all the data. I'm looking at this and I read this. I told Karen, I said, I feel like the two guys in The Big Short, the Christian Bale character and the Steve Carell character, they're looking at this and go, how are they getting away with this? They're just lying to people. How do they get away with this kind of stuff? When you look at the inflation numbers and you look at the way people are reacting to all this stuff, it is just as irrational as what we saw with the 2008 crash. It absolutely is.
Yeah, I mean, it's a meme coin economy, David. Not understanding fundamentals or what economics. I mean, supply and demand is a big thing, and then looking at the market, and that's why I'm not in the standard market, and I don't have that expertise there. I'm pretty myopic. I stay in my lane of commodities, gold, silver, Bitcoin. That's what I do. But if you look at the market, they're all overpriced, overvalued, and then if you take out AI from like the top 7, the market is garbage. I mean, if you really look at it, it's not built on anything. And I think that's a fundamental problem coming back to the issue of our currency and the type of economy that we have. It's irrational. It doesn't make any sense. But on a long enough timeline, even the irrational has to correct. And that's why we saw $5,600 gold in the last 90 days, or is it 90 days? Maybe going back to January. I forget what month it is sometimes. But you go back, it's this year for sure. You go back, especially, when the war kicked off and it jumped, and then there was that big oil sell-off. A lot of this stuff, I mean, you're just looking at gold and silver are at discount rates right now. Yeah. This is discount bargain land. And I don't know, maybe you find a further floor on this. I'm not exactly sure. I pulled like major price predictions from the institutions. The bullish case for gold right now is like 6,000 in the next 12 months. And the bearish case is 4,800. Like, so, same thing with silver. The bearish case for silver is like 75. And then the upside is like, most bullish case is 125. I don't know. Somewhere in there is probably the right number, but it doesn't really even matter because at the end of the day, those currencies that are going to have to debase themselves. I mean, they can raise rates all they want in the interim, but they're going to be forced to have to do something to pull their economies out of the abyss. Like there's nothing that's going to stop that. There's a reckoning that's going to have to happen because of the economic damage that's been done just from high energy prices, David.
Yeah. Well, you look at the securitization thing again, and you got these guys who are looking at it, say, this is absolute garbage. There's no value here. How did they keep growing this? And that was the thing. The one guy, he nearly crashed out because people were losing confidence. He was buying these shorts and having to, maintain them and keep pouring money in there to sustain them. And it was bleeding him. And it's like, how hasn't this house of cards collapsed already? This makes absolutely no sense. And so when you look at it, Zero Hedge has got an article. They talk about trading versus investing. And they said traders, whether they are skilled or unskilled, tend to track near-term signals for immediate rates of return. So, what did Trump say today? That type of thing. While longer-term investors are typically watching history, debt cycles, currency debasement, and they do it with a patient detachment. Since 2000, gold has outperformed the S&P when compared against the major global paper currencies that are down 94% since 2000. Gold is up 1,580% since 2000, has demonstrably outperformed fiat quote-unquote money. And so the reality is that even the banks, they point out, understand what is happening here. But the fundamentals of history, economics, and therefore currency debasement confirm a clear pattern by desperately broken nations to inflate their way out of debt at the expense of their currencies. Again, they're always going to try to monetize it. That's what Trump is desperate to do. And it's not just because he needs to pay the debt, but that's a big part of it. And so he's going to be pedal to the metal for this inflation. It's going to happen one way or the other because of what he's doing with oil and energy prices. They can ignore it in their statistics, but the reality is something that is completely different. And the more they lie to us, the bigger the adjustment is going to be when people start to bring this thing back in alignment with reality. It's just a measure of corruption, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting the perception that the average person has too when they look at the financial world or they look at the monetary systems. I see something different than if I watch, MSNBC or one of the or Fox Business or whatever, or CNBC. I look at what's actually happening with the infrastructure. If you look at like the metrics, when we talk about gold surpassing treasuries, and then we talk about gold surpassing the dollar as the most held reserve asset by central banks and other things. But they're actually the building out of the infrastructure to have physical gold be the trading commodity or currency for the rest of the world. Meanwhile, the dollar continues to lose market share and usage daily. I mean, it's not something like it's not something that's going to go in the other direction. The dollar is still used widely in the world, but it's every day there's a lot less usage, right? And just countries dumping the dollar, getting into the gold holdings. It's not like even no other currencies replacing it. Even the supposed currency that was going to come out from the BRICS nations, the BRICS were supposedly going to have a current. I didn't think so, but this is what a lot of people thought. They were going to have a unifying currency. No, it's gold. It's already there. And so if you're just looking at that, just that alone, knowing that the IMF is warning that U.S. debt is no longer attractive. It's losing the credibility. We're doing that. We're losing credibility at a rapid rate right now because of this administration. Not that any administration's been great, but this is pretty bad. We're losing credibility left and right, and there's no certainty at all. So markets love that. So the entire global system, to me, is reacting kind of in an immune system way against that uncertainty, and it's going back to what has always been stable. Gold wins out. You can cover it up, you can have the fake prosperity and all the rest, but at the end of the day, it's coming back, and I think they're running back to it. Actually, it's faster than I thought possible. Even looking at the stories that pop up about Hong Kong, and I know I mention this all the time, but it's just, I think it's probably one of the most important things to watch, because the resetting of the global monetary system back to gold is a choice that these countries are making. They're making the decision to do it, and it's a conscious decision. It'll have major ramifications on our ability to borrow or print or just expand and debase. We'll do it. It's going to happen. We're going to do it further. There'll be more dollars in the market because we're going to make them. Don't get fooled by, inflation data is really high, so we're going to keep rates the way they are or raise them. Well, fine, you might for a little while, but you always be forced at the end of the day to print. They're
Yes.
going to do quantitative easing. They're going to lower rates because it's either that or they have, Mad Max. Okay. At the end of the day, they're going to print, folks. I mean, it's
right.
not a question of if, it's when.
And all the stuff about interest rates, when we talk about this, Gerald Celente will always say, that's nonsense. When you look at even their rigged inflation numbers, the types of movements that they're talking about in interest rates, that's not going to do anything at all. I mean, unless you're to do something like Volcker did, go up to 20% or something, you're not going to have any real interest rates. And, I guess as you're talking about, we've lost all our credibility. Maybe they need to change MAGA to MACA, Make America Credible Again. I think we're going to have a difference in regime change up there for that. But here's some numbers, for example. You're talking about how when we weaponize the financial system, that was a shot in the arm to BRICS doing things. And of course, since that happened in 2022, central bank gold purchasing has increased by 5-fold. And when you look at what is happening today versus 1970s, central banks around the world were selling gold back then. But right now, except for Turkey, central banks are not really selling gold. They're still buying gold. You have central banks from Poland to Asia are net buyers of gold. And the reason for that goes back to what Biden was doing. It's surprising to see that nobody in the Republican press is trying to blame Biden for that. It's because Trump is going down the same path and doing things even worse than Biden, I guess.
Well, it's true. I mean, weaponization of the dollar has been U.S. policy now for the last 50 years. Mm-hmm. And before that, it was about using our standing to further strengthen the dollar by world usage. We were the world's reserve currency. That was one of the reasons where our standing was so strong. We were able to go off the gold standard and break our own agreement and still hold and maintain supremacy. That's how strong the dollar was, or at least the perception of the strength of the dollar. So we don't have that anymore. We've ruined that. I mean, even accelerating after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the fall of communism, or fall of the Soviet Union. Communism is alive and well, but the fall
and Washington
fall of the Soviet, very much so. McCarthy was right. But we lost all credibility. Made the neocon experiments and the Crusades and the rampant Zionism, all that stuff. I mean, that has accelerated. It didn't have to be that way. We could have, I think we could have maintained a long time, even with the fiat currency, but we debased things and we, weaponized the dollar, the sanctions, all that. So the world just built an immune system around. I think that's what BRICS is all about. That's the moving away from the dollar into gold. And I think that, if you look at central bank gold holding, David, it's clearly an indicator that I think these countries are going to reset their own currencies to gold or do something like that. Because you have in a reset, this is the opportunity they have to go back to a stable condition, because a fiat world has created massive chaos. I mean, we're living in a meme coin casino economy worldwide, and it'll make you. Maybe the Fed will come out and you can get tattoos on your forehead or something like that. We'll do Fed.fun. How about somebody get Fed.fun, and you could have the meme coin extension of that into our central banking. I think
what they're going to do is they're going to have like a virtual tattoo on you. That'll be your biometric face ID. Your permission to do everything is like, here's my.
You get your QR code on your forehead.
That's right. We got a couple of comments here. Footstep 77 says, Tony, do you know the Federal Reserve will be no more in exchange for no taxes to transfer to CBDC coming soon? That's kind of I don't know if that's a question or a comment there, but yeah, I think that actually in the U.S. they're going to do a little bit of a head fake. I think instead of going to CBDC, I think they're going to go to stable coins because that's going to be money for the crooks in Washington. They get to participate in it. If they did the Federal Reserve, you've got people like Lutnick and Trump going to be left out of that, but they can wet their beaks if they put in a stable coin.
Yeah, and you got to look at like the dynastic families that set up the Creature from Jekyll Island. You read G. Edward Griffin's great book. If you look at like the Mellons and the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and all the people that set up, like those are dynastic families, and their power may be, even though they have like holdings and they may not have the influence, or it may be a controlled demolition to get rid of the Fed and transition into stable coin. They're going to have to do something. I mean, it's not doing nothing and just holding the current position. you're going to have a real problem with currency debasement. So they have to have a boogeyman. It'll probably be like Iran or Russia or something. Somebody else did it to us. What was it? A Putin's price hike. Remember that through the Biden administration? It was Putin's price hike.
That's right.
The reason you had inflation, right?
Putin did it. Yeah.
Putin did it, right? It's so funny. But yeah, I think that's what to watch. I mean, what is it? Zygmunt Brzezinski talked about an end run around sovereignty. And I think let's do an end run around the currency.
To me, the stablecoin looks like the perfect solution for them. It's about as corrupt and a biggest lie that you can come up with. It's not stable. It's not a coin. It is a digital currency, but they don't call it a digital currency because they don't want you to catch on. And it's not going to be the central bank. It's going to be crony capitalism and kind of fascism, corruption, that type of thing. So I think that's the direction that they're going to go. It also gives them all the capabilities of the CBDC in terms of being able to track you and to set up all of your financial dealings on a permission basis. Doug said the goldbacks are great, aren't they? They make good tips and gifts. I agree. I think that is real. We talked about that last week when you were on. I think that really is going to explode the people who are making that. That's going to be huge, I think.
Yeah. The interesting part about goldbacks is the system they've created. And actually, one of their executives came down and visited with me in person here in Texas. And they're real gracious. And they set me, because they noticed I was buying so many goldbacks over the years. And we put them in Wolfpack. So, yeah, they really explained to me what their goal is, and it's using them as currency. It's not, I mean, they're using them as an exchange in real time, what each goldback is worth. And it's a stable fixed set, whether it's a quarter or whether it's a 10 or a 50 goldback. You just multiply it by the one. So you know what a one goldback is, and you just either divide or multiply. And it's really interesting. We need to work. I think we're going to get a conversion chart on our website, and that's a good reminder. I need to do that for goldbacks. But yeah, in 5 years,
and they've got
goldbacks
for
will
that,
be a lot more ubiquitous.
There's an app for that, isn't there?
Goldback has it on their website. I need to they offered to help me put it up on mine too, so I need to do that.
Yeah, so you just look up the whatever the current, they convert it over for the current price of gold, and so there's your objective standard for doing that, and that gets around all the requirements that people have in terms of, well, how do I know if I'm going to just accept physical gold for payment somewhere? How do I verify that? If I'm not a gold dealer or something, I don't know if this is a genuine coin or something like that. And how do I, am I going to weigh this stuff when I'm there? Well, if you got a goldback, that takes care of it. You got that app that tells you what the current price of gold is and how that translates to X number of goldbacks. Real Jason Barker, good to see you, Jason. Again, Knights of the Storm, you can find them. Tony's going to be having a program right after this one today, and on Twitter and on Rumble. And of course, you can find Jason Parker and Knights of the Storm. You can find they have a listing there of a lot of different programs. This one is on there, but a lot of them. Guard Goldsmith is on there. Many other like-minded people who are not trying to game you for audience. They're going to give you their honest opinion. Yes. And so, Jason Barker says, I think of it like gold and silver are on sale right now. I agree, absolutely. He says stable coins are going to be backed by other crypto, which are valued in the dollar. It is a circular firing squad. Well, it's going to be something going to make a lot of money on. And of course, you got Jared going around to the Saudis and many of these people in the Middle East and setting up deals with them. I want to stay as far away from that crowd as I can. So yeah, absolutely. And then we don't have any more comments or questions for you. Anything you want to tell us about what is going on other than a massive sale on gold right now, I guess?
Well, it's a massive sale. And yesterday it was a good opportunity. I've been waiting. I'd had some reserves set aside. I'm talking about personally, like not even for the shop, just personally. I did buy stuff for Wise Wolf, and the fractional gold, but I wanted to tell your audience that's what I bought. Like I bought for myself personally. I saw what was I bought 1 gram gold bars in sheets. I bought 10th ounce gold pieces. I didn't go higher than that. I want tradable fractional gold, and I'm going to get it at a discount rate. And even if I'm paying a premium, it doesn't matter because the spot price on a long enough arc is going to eat that up. It's going to eat up that premium. I'm not worried about it. So like, just money where my mouth is. It's funny. My son bought some product yesterday just at the shop, and he comes back here and he goes, Dad, look what I bought. And he had like a vintage angle hard gold bar. He's like, I've never seen this before. It was really old. We looked it up and it had like a collector's value. So I put that in my collection. I just was yesterday, I just put cash on the table and I bought as much as I could because these numbers don't make me not want to buy gold. They make me want to buy gold. And that's like, you got to get out of that mentality. Cause I promise I've been in this business a long time. If we were in the reverse, if gold was going up, then my phone would be ringing. But it's funny how it goes quiet when gold is going down, right? It's just human nature. Like you got to break that pattern.
That's right.
You know, if a Ferrari's on sale, why do you want to wait for it to go back up? Like if you're going to buy the car, it's just so funny to me. But that's just
it is the Ferrari effect, isn't it? I mean, if something is highly overpriced, you want to jump in on it.
Right. It's just human. Like you gotta break that cycle. And I'm guilty of it. I look at something, oh, it's going down. And then I think, whoa, I gotta load up because I'm going to look back, a year from now and be really glad, or 2 years. And maybe it takes longer. It doesn't really matter to me because I know that currency that I'm trading out, that I'm taking those green pieces of paper and I'm trading those out. They're worth nothing. I give that psychological value, but I know that gold, I know that if I get a little 10th ounce Krugerrand, I'm doing pretty good. Long term.
Right. That's right. Absolutely is. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Tony. And again, I'll just remind everybody, if you go to davidknight.gold, Tony has set that up to let you know that you've come through us and let him know, I should say. And so I appreciate you doing that, Tony. Thank you for supporting the program. And it is an interesting time that we live in. It's the Chinese curse. But at this point in time, with the prices down on something and the fundamentals as we're looking at this, if you look at history, you look at the fundamental things that are there, I mean, it really does say sale. It is screaming sale.
It's true.
So thank you so much for joining us. Yes, it absolutely is on sale. Need to dust out the old commercial of Yukon Cornelius. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's got something to tell. He's screaming, it's on sale, it's on sale. We'll be right back, folks. Thank you.
Decoding the mainstream propaganda. It's the David Knight Show.
Tell Alexa to add the APS radio skill and have access to the best channels anywhere. From country to blues, classic hits to news, APS Radio curates incredibly diverse playlists for you to enjoy. Get details at apsradio.com.
That's right, boys and girls. There's a post-election sale on silver and gold. Trump euphoria has caused a dip in silver and gold. It's time to buy some metals with fiat dollars before they come to their senses. Go to davidknight.gold to get in touch with the wise wolf himself, Tony Arterburn. He knows where to look to find silver and gold.
Right. And you can't even come to your senses anymore because Trump's getting rid of the penny. So let's take a look. We were talking about pump.fun. Well, when we look at the irrationality of what is happening, whether you look at the stock market or you look at the massive amount of power use that is being put into it, or the massive amounts of capital that are being poured into artificial intelligence, it doesn't make any sense and it's not sustainable. U.S. power use is going to beat a record high in this year and next year, says the EIA. They're saying that it's because of the power surge of things dedicated to artificial intelligence and cryptocurrency. And you combine that with the insanity of the climate MacGuffin and all these renewable energy mandates. As renewable output rises, they said the share of power generation from natural gas is going to slide from 40% to 39%. Coal's share will fall from 17 to 15%. in 2026 and 2027. So they keep removing reliable sources of power. They keep putting in unreliable, expensive sources of power. And then they burden the system with the artificial intelligence and the cryptocurrency. Yeah, it's not a formula for disaster at all, is it? Meanwhile, as I've said before, we got to be careful about how we push back against the AI. I don't think that outright prohibition is the way to go. I don't think it's sustainable because the government wants it. That is, I think, one of the most dangerous use cases of artificial intelligence is the government wants this. And I think if we push hard on this prohibition stuff, what they'll do is they'll prohibit the small companies. They'll prohibit you and I from having access to something which could actually be a useful tool if we have it to counteract some of what they're doing. But I think it is legitimate for people to push back against these data centers as a trespass. And that is what's happening now in several different places. Elon Musk's thing that he's got in Memphis and on the border of Mississippi, you got a lot of Mississippi residents who say the power plant fueling nearby data centers is blasting omnipresent, inescapable noise that has eroded their health and their home values. And of course, what's going to happen is government wants this to expand this rapidly because they want it to be omnipresent, they want it to be omniscient, and they want it to be inescapable. And so they're going to be behind this. And I think probably our best way to push back against it is, it's the same type of thing that we look at with gun control. The liberals say, I don't like it when we have a shooting, so let's just ban all guns. And we look at it and we say, well, that's technology that is out. You can't stop it. Instead, what you need to do is you need to have your own personal gun so that you can protect yourself. And I think that is the way that we move forward on this. But it is a trespass. The artificial intelligence boom is wreaking havoc on communities across the United States, says the lawsuit, subjecting thousands of residents to near constant noise and vibrations. The plaintiffs are seeking damages for alleged emotional distress, reduced property values, and other harms, as well as disgorgement of an unspecified amount and profits. And so there's also the monetary insanity of this and whether or not they can sustain it. But this is happening all over the country. That is just there in Memphis and the Mississippi area. In Wyoming, as they point out in this one article from Bloomberg, it says that 20 years ago, this couple, Stan and Tammy, moved just outside the Old West Railroad town on 3 acres of prairie. From their back window, they could see cattle, roaming antelope, and coyotes on the prowl. But now that is no longer the scene. Instead, what they see are heavy trucks, earth movers, and hundreds of workers running nearly around the clock. And this is setting up a Meta platform data center. To the east of them, Microsoft has announced plans to triple the acreage of their already sizable site. And to the south, work is just beginning on a Project Jade, which will be among the biggest data centers in the U.S. So they're putting a lot of this stuff up in Montana. And I think one of the reasons that they're doing this is one of the data centers where Amazon was under a lot of pressure from local residents. They were saying, yeah, well, the great thing is we're not going to use a lot of water because we're going to use natural cooling most of the year. If you take this into the northern climates, they can avoid using maybe as much water because they can use the fact that the area is typically very cold. The guy, Stan, they talked to, he says, I've been a believer in private property rights, but the construction noise, the rumbling, constant influx of workers have the couple at their wits' end. And they said, when we look at what is happening to the area that we moved into, it is absolutely heartbreaking. And that's the key thing. I mean, we want to understand that there are, want private property rights, but that is part of your private property rights because that noise is actually a trespass of what is happening with that. Well, there's an interesting article on Revolver, and the headline says, AI companies desperately need you to believe that your job is doomed. And the point that they're making is that it is such an unbelievable unfathomable amount of money that they're channeling into this, that the only way that they can sustain this bubble is if people think that there's something as big as what they're telling everybody. Everyone is going to have their job replaced. If they just put this out there as a very amazing tool that is going to help people do a lot of white-collar jobs that they've got or whatever, if they put it out there as a tool, that's not going to do it. If they put it out as a society-altering, we're going to take everybody's job type of transformation, then that can be used to justify the ongoing investment into AI that really has exceeded all rationality.
And even if they're right, more or less, on a long enough timeline, they can, ruin everything by jumping the shark and putting in all these stuff before the AIs are ready to take everyone's jobs. I mean, even when they are ready to take everyone's jobs, it's still going to be a disaster. It's the old thing of either we're doomed because the AIs are going to take everyone's jobs, or we're doomed because everyone's investing in the AI that's going to fail. But there is a third thing where we have, the government regulating it to force everyone to use the crappy AIs.
That's right. That's right. So the big bold claim might not be as real as they want investors to think. It might actually be a part of their game. The economic model behind the AI boom depends on convincing everyone that mass white-collar job destruction is not just possible, but it is guaranteed. And so we got to get everybody a universal basic income, a guaranteed income, because we're going to take everybody's jobs. So the only way to keep raising hundreds of billions of dollars is to sell everyone on the idea that you're going to demolish a massive chunk of the labor market. Otherwise, it doesn't work. You can't keep getting people to put this kind of money in. But understand just take a look at the numbers, just like we were talking about. What happens to the Federal Reserve? What can they really do in terms of getting inflation under control? That's going to kick off, that is already kicking off because of what is happening with energy prices and with food prices and many other things like that. They can't raise the interest rates as much as they'd like to because they're trapped. They're so heavily in debt they can't make the payments. And so a similar thing is happening with OpenAI and the other companies. In a year, Anthropic and OpenAI's businesses have to be roughly twice the size they are today. And then they have to double again, basically every year until 2029 or 2030. In that time period, they must also raise hundreds of billions of dollars, or alternatively, they need to turn deeply unprofitable businesses into profitable ones while also doubling their revenue. Doesn't look like that's going to happen, does it? Alternatively, both must severely reduce their costs, except that if they do that, they won't have any need for all that compute capacity, which will deprive Oracle, Google, Microsoft, SpaceX, Cerebras, CoreWeave, TeraWulf, Cipher, and Hut H out of the $1.1 trillion in remaining performance obligations. So if AI companies want investors, banks, and markets to keep pouring money into these ridiculously sized piles of money, they need a big future to justify it. AI will help with paperwork isn't just remotely close to big enough. AI will replace your entire workforce, is what they have to sell people on. So it's so massive, the whole thing only makes sense if AI turns into this man-eating revenue monster overnight. And that's the whole thing. They're expanding this so rapidly. How do they sustain this? At what point does everybody realize that this is overhyped? And just like the dot-com boom, you had the bust that happened with that because not because, again, the internet was going to be a big thing. The internet was going to change things massively, but they got ahead of the expectations. And what we see happening with all this stuff, when I see the markets reacting on Trump's pronouncements, it's usually because they're very optimistic. They're looking for some good information. And so even though they know he's lying, if he throws out something that looks hopeful, they jump on that with both feet. And so there's this built-in bias right now towards optimism in the marketplace. What happens when that eventually flips? Then when it eventually flips, even if there's real good news, people are not really going to move on it. Just like right now, when there's really bad news, they don't trade on that. Instead, they want to hear the good news, and they're not paying any attention if there's any bad news. And so once this thing goes upside down, it's going to be really hard to correct it. And that's what's going to really break the AI bubble. When somebody bursts their bubble of optimism, it's going to be real hard to get that back. Infrastructure is being built, compute commitments are being made, and they're being done at a level that demands that generative AI and AI compute have to generate over $2 trillion in annual revenue by 2030. Where do they get that money? Especially when everybody's losing their jobs, right? Some of it may come from the government. But again, if government runs into issues with just printing money, as they're doing right now, bribing people, that's part of what Marsha Blackburn is doing for the Trump administration. Actually, it's not just prohibiting that state and local governments can't regulate AI, but they're going to bribe them as well to do that. It's the same playbook that they did with COVID. You can't use that kind of treatment. But I'll bribe you to lock people down and put them on ventilators, to vaccinate them, and all the rest of this stuff. That is a surefire tip-off as to what is really going on with all this stuff. But if the federal government runs into issues in terms of their deficits, that's going to put a big hole in their ability to bribe people to set up this big brother system. And that's really what AI is. That's what you should really be concerned about. Not so much about it taking your job, but about it becoming this godlike big brother looking at you. Everybody's talking about, going back to Hugo de Garis and a lot of these scientists, it's going to be a godlike intelligence and it's just going to exterminate us. No, the purpose of government is to set this thing up, not in terms, when you think about artificial intelligence, think about it in terms of the way we talk about intelligence being the intelligence agencies, the spies. It is AI spying. It is artificial spying. That's what you should be concerned about. And that's the real intelligence that's going to be there. And that is not general AI. That is a narrow AI. That's using AI as a tool. They can very easily do that. They don't need to have super intelligence. They don't need to have general intelligence. But if they have the kind of intelligence where they can look at our activity and other things like that, that is what makes it really threatening to society. But when you look at the monetary side of it, as he points out, AI doesn't just have to grow. It has to explode into one of the biggest revenue engines on Earth and in history. By selling the public a future where everyone is supposedly lining up to buy AI and replace their entire workforce, that is a whole different story than just AI is useful. And again, it is the government use case of creating a godlike surveillance state. And just to give you an example of this, here's an innocent man who was freed after spending over 50 days in jail due to horribly inaccurate AI facial recognition tech. And this has happened over and over again. This is he was identified by an AI system in an 85% match. There have been at least 14 known cases of wrongful arrest due to facial recognition software. The technology simply is just too dangerous for law enforcement to be using at all. Folks, that's where we need to focus the prohibition. We need to prohibit government from using this for things like this. As a matter of fact, what happened in this particular case, this guy was arrested, and even though he had been clocked into his job hundreds of miles away when the crime took place. He was arrested, made to spend nearly 2 months in custody. His lawyers were finally able to establish his alibi in court. There was no proper investigation done even to reach out to me or to see if I was even in the state of Florida. He said, and I sat there for over 50 days in the worst jail ever. Wrongful arrests based on AI facial recognition software are becoming something of a pattern with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. The first victim was Robert Dillon. He was a 93% match. He was wrongfully accused of attempting to lure and kidnap a 12-year-old child. Like Richardson, Dillon was a world away at the time. He was 5 hours away on the other side of the state. According to Privacy Litigation Director for the Electronic Frontier Foundation, it's the 14th known case of wrongful arrest due to AI facial recognition.
And that's, again, the 14th known case.
Yeah, known
We don't know
case.
how many cases there are. All these, they're pointing out that he was 5 hours away. He was on the other side of the state. This guy had a airtight alibi for it, and he still spent 50 days in jail. What about the people who don't have an airtight alibi?
That's right. That's right. And this guy, the effect that he's had on his life, it's just completely destroyed his life, being in jail for 50 years, wrongfully accused.
Or the guy that was accused of being a pedophile who tried to kidnap a 12-year-old child. That is the sort of thing that can really ruin your life.
Oh, yeah, yeah. On top of losing his job, because no working class person can be missing from their job for 2 months and keep it, he told the paper that he lost his home as well as custody of his 2 kids. He says, I'm not sure how I'm going to bounce back from this one, you know. It's a lot. I'm just taking it one day at a time. And then here's another one, how a bad AI, this is Flock that did this to people. And of course, Flock and these other systems that are out there, they're now going to add scanning your iPhone or your watch or these other electronic devices. They're going to add that to what they're doing right now to profile people. They started out as just license plate readers. Then they started creating a kind of idiosyncratic database, looking at flaws on your car, dents or whatever, to identify your specific car in addition to the license plate. And now they're looking to add electronic devices that they can scan. So this is a bad AI camera, a Flock. It put the wrong man in a San Diego jail cell. The officers had a timestamp that ruled him out. There was a missing gun. The hoodie was the wrong color, but the algorithm's answer outranked all of the evidence that was there. So this is a guy, he was charged with armed carjacking that happened 5 miles from where he actually was. A Flock automated license plate reader had pointed police toward his friend's red Alfa Romeo, and they decided that that was enough. And so what happened was the police responded to an attempted carjacking report. They tried to stop a red Alfa Romeo. About 10 minutes later, the driver fled at speeds reaching 100 miles per hour, and officers lost the car without ever reading its plate. And so, again, it doesn't say that they knew that this was even the car that was involved in that. I mean, it might have been a stolen car. There might have been a lot of reasons why this guy lost them on a car chase. They were left
5 miles in a city like this isn't that much of a coincidence. You know, there's a lot of cars and a lot of expensive cars in that area, in a very densely populated area.
That's right. And so they got the description of only a red Italian sports car with tinted windows. Then a Flock reader that was 5 miles away photographed a red Alfa Romeo. The officers who'd been chasing the carjacker got the image. They recognized the vehicle in the image as the vehicle that we were pursuing, they said, due to the red paint and the black tinted windows. It's not like they didn't even identify it down to the model of it being a red Alfa Romeo. It's just that it was a red sports car with tinted windows. That was really the key with it. The problem was the timing. The Old Town photo was taken 23 seconds after officers in the different area of town had tried to stop the fleeing suspect. Now, he was going fast. He was going 100 miles an hour, but no car can cover 5 miles of city streets in 23 seconds. I mean, even if it wasn't city streets, even if it was all green lights and no traffic, think about that. You know, 60 miles an hour is a mile a minute. And so you would have to be going 15 miles a minute, which would be about 900 miles per hour. Maybe he teleported. I don't know. Maybe he only had to get it up to 88 miles an hour, and he could change locations. Maybe it was really a red DeLorean or something.
So ironically, the Flock thing that got him in jail was actually an airtight alibi.
That's right. Yeah, but they still put him in jail anyway. They arrested him, pulling these guys out of a cigar lounge that they'd walked into after parking the car. An officer described one of the men as wearing a white hoodie. The victim had described the carjacker in a gray hoodie. A search of the car turned up no weapons, even though the crime involved a man who was brandishing a handgun. The route that they'd taken to Old Town had passed several other flock cameras that could have confirmed where they came from, but none of the other flock cameras had a picture of them, assuming that they had driven there. But of course, if they had driven there that amount of time, they would have been going 900 miles an hour. Maybe they would have. I guess that's the explanation. They were going so fast. They were just a red streak when they went past the cameras that were there. But there were so many different issues there. What the police did instead was they got the carjacking victim, brought him to Old Town and said, look at these guys. Are those the guys? And the guy said, well, yeah, I know because of the jacket and the beard and the skin color, he said. And that's one of the things that they're saying is that the AI cameras are typically skewed towards false identification the darker your skin is. During his interview, he told officers where he'd been. He said, my friend picked me up from the apartment in his red Alfa Romeo, then drove me straight to the cigar shop right there. Nothing else happened. I'm on probation and I have a fourth waiver, he said. So here's somebody who's got some priors. So if you're, that's our guy, right? He's got a record, so we're going to go with that. They took him to jail. He stayed nearly a month. He missed Thanksgiving and other family events. Eventually, his lawyers were able to bring some rationality to this, and they got him out. But the city signed a $7 million contract with Flock in November of 2023, and they're paying another $2 million per year to run this. I don't think that we're getting our money's worth out of this, but this is the direction that's all going. Meanwhile, in the UK, Keir Starmer is calling for spyware on all phones. And that is happening basically here in America as well, with Marsha Blackburn, who will probably be our next governor here in Tennessee, and the Trump administration.
One thing the UK already has is their police have a contract with a company called Cellebrite. It's an Israeli cybersecurity firm that has a little tablet that they can plug into any iPhone or Android device and see everything on it without having to unlock it. So that was one of the things that made me look into a type of phone called Graphene OS. That's the only one they can't get into, so they're trying to outlaw that one.
There was a funny skit. I haven't shown it to you, but it was on Saturday Night Live, and it had they're talking about Hormuz Jeff or something like that, and it's this guy. He's the shady character who's got like one small boat, and he'll take anything through the blockade for you. He doesn't care, right? But the funniest part of the skit was at the end, Lance, where they said, but you got to use this operating system, and you got to go here to download it because it was in this obscure corner of the internet, and it was based on operating system and a weird phone, and you had to have all these things, and then you had to download this special thing. That was worth the price of the whole skit right there, what they were doing with that. And that's really the only path that we've got to try to avoid what they're doing in the UK and what they want to do in the US as well.
So they already have it so that they can access everything on the phone when they pick anyone out the street and decide to audit them. I guess this new spyware thing is going to be, they don't have to get you off the street. They're always watching. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, I don't have to have a physical connection there. Well, what's happening in the U.S.? Well, we have the Kids Online Safety Act, which will always use kids as the cover for what they want to do anyway. The kids are the MacGuffin. The No Fakes Act, and also age verification requirements. And it is mandatory Marsha that's behind it already. Marsha Blackburn steering the talks, and the White House says Senator Blackburn is spearheading the negotiation with the White House to finalize legislative text of an AI preemption package that includes protections for kids, creators, and communities through the Senate version of KOSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, the No Fakes Act, and the age verification requirements. She's spearheaded about 4 or 5 horrible bills that are going to set up a big brother surveillance state using AI, and at the same time try to shut down the ability of states to regulate this. Of course, they're going to run headlong into the 10th Amendment. But I just look at this and I say, so we're going to have a governor in Tennessee that absolutely hates the 10th Amendment? And it's like, yes, unless we get Monty Fritz He is the long shot of liberty here. I guess we could say he's kind of a Hail Mary or a Hail Monty. Because if we don't get Monty in, we're going to wind up with mandatory Marsha. And she's going to set up blacklists for all kinds of things. And we'll have, I guess we could call those the Blackburn blacklists that are going to be out there. But it will be the end of an anonymous internet, which is exactly what authoritarian regimes always want to do. That's what China is doing. So you have to prove you're old enough. To prove you're old enough, you upload a government ID, you submit to a face scan, or you let a service study your behavior closely enough to guess your age. None of those actually confirms your age, and nothing else. They confirm identity. They leave a record that outlives the check. And so the internet used to be a place where you could use your username to, now they're starting to demand your legal name, your face, and all of your documents. Why can't people see where this leads? Why can't people see that we don't want to have people rule over us who want to do this type of thing to us? They have absolutely no regard for what has happened in history in terms of government abuses. They have absolutely no regard for the Constitution that they swore to uphold. The internet starts to demand your legal name, your face, and your documents. The bigger trade sits underneath the child safety language. States have been writing their own AI rules, some of them addressing how companies collect biometric data and how they automate decisions about residents. Preemption, however, would freeze that, removing one of the few places that people have to push back on how these systems handle their data. And so what they want to do is they want to preempt the 10th Amendment. And we've seen this happen over and over again. Every time you've got a large corporation that wants to do something that's going to harm people, what do? They go to Washington and they say, we don't want to have a patchwork quilt of regulations. We don't have one standard that's going to rule them all, right? And we know what always happens with that. It always greenlights their abuses, and it always takes away our liberty and our freedom and our dignity, turns us into a B.F. Skinner society. Well, one good news is that Sam Altman's eyeball scanning company is now laying off workers. Remember this? His effort to set up a database that he could sell to every government. And he had this orb that you'd hold this thing and you'd look into it and it would get a biometric scan of your retina. And then for doing that, it gave you a little bit of an incentive. It would give you a little bit of his, I think he called it WorldCoin. And,
I guess the name Palantir was already taken.
That's right. The company, which had employed as many as 500 people and is valued at $2.5 billion with backing from big-name tech investors like Andreessen Horowitz, they're now laying off an unspecified number of employees. The Orb is a biometric ID device that scans irises in order to provide proof of humanity. I think we have yet to see any proof of humanity from Sam Altman, don't you think? No matter how many times you scan that guy's iris, you won't find any proof of humanity there. The idea goes that the Orb is the only way to combat the growing risk of AI deepfakes and scams, which is a development that Altman, as chief executive of OpenAI, is coincidentally spearheading. So he's both a problem and the solution, isn't he? Although the company's World ID project has found heavyweight partners in software firms like Tinder, Zoom, and DocuSign, numerous governments in Asia, Africa, South America, and Europe have halted or outright banned the orbs due to issues with the company's collection of biometric information. But of course, not here in America, right? Because here in America, we got people like Marsha Blackburn and Donald Trump who want all of this stuff. They want to lock us down in this Orwellian society. Mandatory Marsha. Yeah, maybe that's what they'll do. They'll just work here in the U.S. Well, LifeSite News had an interesting article. They said, making music can save us from the dehumanization of AI. I thought that's kind of an interesting concept. And what they're talking about is creativity. You know, you don't want to sacrifice the things that really set us apart, the things that really are the essence of us being in the image of God. They say AI tools are not neutral. By their very design, they remove the need for humans to think, to create, to interact with each other. How we use our will is at the core of our humanity. AI tools weaken our will. This is particularly alarming for the young people because they have yet to develop habits of persistence. It is also easy for adults to become lazy and dependent on AI. Making music, however, is the antithesis of this AI-induced languor. It is an activity to which we must give sustained and intense focus. It's just one of many, but I think it is a good example of this. So again, singing or practicing an instrument, that is a key thing.
Of course, when it comes to creativity with AI, I think it's there's a dividing line between using an AI to do the sorts of things that you would have done by yourself before versus using an AI to do things that you couldn't have done without it. And you can still be creative while using these tools.
Oh, I agree, yeah. In a sense, it wasn't AI, but, the music that I do for the show and other music that I do, it's, as they point out, just to get a good sound out of an instrument, that is a very long process of practice and repetition. Anybody can drag a bow across a violin and it can send chills up your spine if it's done the wrong way, or it can send chills up your spine if you do it the right way. And there's a lot of practice that separates those two extremes. But that's one of the things what I do with the MIDI stuff is, they have a recording of somebody's playing. It's kind of like the old Mellotron, if you remember those from like the 1970s, that actually have each key that you would press on a keyboard would be attached to like a 30-second recording of somebody actually playing that instrument. And so it would start with the attack and then, play that as long as you'd hold it down. It was really a mechanical nightmare. I knew somebody who was an engineering major as well as playing in bands, and he had one of these things, and he actually was sent to Switzerland to fix one that was being used by the band Yes. And it truly was kind of a Rube Goldberg thing because what they were trying to do was what the MIDI recordings are now doing digitally. And you had all kinds of issues, as you can imagine. If you've got spring-loaded tapes, you're going to have tapes that are going to break. You have all kinds of mechanical issues, things that can go wrong. But what that does is that gets around the issue of you having an instrument and learning how to make an attractive sound out of it. But you still have to put it together. And that is a creative process as well. And so they talk in this about how it's great to watch live music and to see how people are making the sounds. And, that's something I do with Travis's son when I'm babysitting with him. From an early age, I would play Mozart for him, but I would always make sure that I had something where there's a string quartet that he can actually watch the people making the sound. And he really gets drawn into that. He gets drawn into that, I think, more than any other video that he looks at. He gets real anxious when they pause between movements. And he would always get really quiet. He would start crying and would play the Mozart, and that would make him quiet. But they say, why would you struggle to compose a piece if AI can compose something that is decent in seconds? And all you do is just tell it, I want it about this particular subject, and I want it in this particular music style, and it'll generate it. But there is no satisfaction in that. It takes a very long time for me to put this stuff together, but it is very satisfying when I get it done. It's just that since my stroke, I haven't been able to really do that. They said, it takes a lot of intensity, and it takes a lot of repetition and all this, and that's the thing that's been pretty difficult since I've been able to recover in most ways, but I can't play the keyboard anymore, and I have a difficult time putting it together. They say the extremely technical to make music is also highly creative. You decide on the flexibility of the tempo of a piece, the gradation of intensity, the emotional meaning behind each phase, and all of that is still present when you do it with MIDI. But that really is something that in the last year, there used to be a flurry of activity all the time. People were doing new instrument libraries. They would find some kind of a rare instrument, some kind of an ethnic instrument. They were always upping the game in terms of the number of attacks that you could simulate with this stuff, and the quality of it and so forth. But that all just stopped abruptly about a year ago. I haven't seen the people that I would look at and kind of follow haven't come up with a new library in over a year. It's amazing to see something die that quickly, but it's still there. And as they point out, no two performances of a piece will ever be identical. And so while these places are still going down, I guess I'm now using something that is kind of an anachronism in a big way. But we're going to take a quick break, folks, and we'll be right back. I'll play a piece for you here that you can listen to. Again, this was one that took me quite a while to do. This is John Williams, and it's taken from, we'll use it for Yellowstone, but it was taken from The Cowboys. You might remember that movie had John Wayne and Little Richie Cunningham.
Defending the American dream. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Tell Alexa to add the APS radio skill and have access to the best channels anywhere. From country to blues, classic hits to news, APS Radio curates incredibly diverse playlists for you to enjoy. Get details at apsradio.com.
Well, we're getting close to the end of the program. I want to remind you that tomorrow we've got a couple of really good interviews lined up. One of them is the duty to disobey. It is a man who was in the military, and he was kicked out over the vaccine mandates. He's now a state representative in Arizona, and he's talking about what can be done at the state level to try to make sure this type of thing doesn't happen again. But he also fills us in on the current state of I guess we could call it the desire to have compensation and correction, which is not really happening with most of the people who were kicked out. And it is a documentary that's being put together by Children's Health Defense. So he'll be joining us to talk about that. And then we have, as I mentioned earlier this week, we have an interview with a scientist. He is Dr. Michael Galen, and he was an instructor at Harvard University in terms of physics, but he became also a presenter for, I think it was ABC News, I want to say. He won several Emmys for programs that he did there. He actually went down to the Titanic and thought he was going to die because they got temporarily trapped down there. This is a very interesting interview. But the most interesting thing about it is that he gives this personal testimony. That's what his documentary is about. His personal testimony about how he went from a hardcore atheist who loved science and thought that was the beginning and the end of everything. And it was actually science that led him to Christ. And it's an interesting testimony of someone. And I think it is an important documentary for everybody, especially you may be a Christian. It's like, okay, I've answered these questions for myself and I'm satisfied that the Bible is God's word and so forth. And yet you're going to run into people who are going to have a lot of the same concerns that this professor did when he was a scientist and an atheist. And he worked out those answers for himself. And he's got a lot of, he's got a perspective on science that is a lot deeper than you'll find in general. And so when people say, well, religion is simply for the people who are ignorant and they're looking for an easy answer to stuff, he says, well, there's not really any easy answers in science either. And so it's an excellent documentary. I've seen it, and we have an interview with him tomorrow, as well as the individual who's now the Arizona State representative, and his name was, trying to remember his last name, maybe you remember it, is Nick,
Cupper?
Yeah, Nick Cupper. Thank you very much. Nick Cupper, Cupper with a K. So they'll be joining us tomorrow. I just want the time that we've got, there's been so much that's been happening in terms of violent attacks in the UK. Of course, one of these that has really blown up in the last week or two was something that happened back in December. And it really only got picked up by the media just within the last week or so. And he was stabbed multiple times by a Sikh who was allowed to have a dagger, as long as they called it a ceremonial dagger. And they did not even take this knife off of the guy after the police got there and took him into custody. They believed him that he was, that racist remarks were made by this guy that he stabbed. The guy that he stabbed was bleeding to death. And we played a little bit of a clip for that. They handcuffed him. They drug him across gravel. He was saying, I can't breathe. Please help me. I've been stabbed. I don't believe you, mate. And just completely did nothing at all for him because the other guy said, well, he was a racist white guy. And that's the way the cops are bent. As a matter of fact.
And this is the recent one, not the one from December.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. As a matter of fact, somebody put this up, said, here's a quiz for the cops. A quick quiz. A, he's racist. B, I've been stabbed. Which one of these requires an immediate response? Don't rush. Apparently, this is a difficult question. And literally, they said, well, you know, he would have bled to death anyway. We couldn't get. They had him handcuffed for an hour as he was bleeding out and refused to give him any medical help.
There was a trail of blood from where the attack took place as this guy was trying to get away and get to a hospital. Mm-hmm. He was on his way to a hospital. I believe he had collapsed by the time the police got there. But they, didn't try and take him the rest of the way to the hospital.
Mm-hmm. And this was all based on the fact that the police have this bias that is built in terms of their policing. As a matter of fact, the other guy,
they, for an hour, went through his phone and then his father's phone looking for evidence of racism.
Wow.
While he had blood coming out of his mouth.
Wow. It's just amazing. Now, on the other side, what they've found is that the guy who stabbed him, Vikram Digwa, they found evidence that he had been brandishing a gun and shooting a gun. Now, this is a big no-no in the UK. And so neighbors reported him to the police for that years ago. And they showed video evidence to the police, and they still did nothing. They said, we heard gunshots. We came over here. We took these videos. Here's the videos. He and this guy are, shooting guns inside the city and at a board that they'd set up for a target. And so the police did absolutely nothing about that.
How do we know it wasn't a ceremonial gun?
Yeah, that's the key thing. What was it? I've got a clip here of the magic knife that is there. And again, when you look at this, it truly is amazing what they do and what they don't do. And I'm trying to find that clip here. Where is it? Here it is right here. Somebody made a parody of this because they go to such lengths to allow the Sikhs to have these knives. Nobody else is allowed to have a knife. So here's this guy. He's got his magic knife. This one is gigantic. It's like, 6 feet tall. No problem, mate. I've got a magic knife here. So Dig was known for having an obsession with weapons, knives, guns, all these other things. Court evidence later described him as skilled with weapons, trained with weapons, sleeps with weapons, searches for weapons on his phone. Video evidence from before the murder shows him aggressively handling a sword in public. As a matter of fact, he'd been kicked out of the Sikh temple because he had threatened other Sikhs with a knife, even though they have knives.
I don't think most British people can get a sword, let alone would have a slap on the wrist or no consequences for wielding one in public.
The problem is when I look at the comments from people, and this is an article out of the UK, there's all these tweets of people criticizing it, saying religious exemptions for weapons must end. See, what they're saying is we got to disarm everybody with everything. That simply is not going to solve the problem. On the night that he killed this other guy, Henry Nowick is the guy's name, he and his family called 999. They claimed that Henry needed medical attention for what they described as just a cut to his mouth. They explicitly told the call handler that there were no knives involved, and yet he had stabbed him multiple times in the chest, in the arms or legs, all these different things. And yet this is not something that is new either. As a matter of fact, when you look at a report going back to 2013, I'm trying to skip ahead here because we're running out of time. There was actually another one of these cases that happened back in 2013. I think it's a good example of what is really happening with thank you. Appreciate that. Let's see. Here it is. Okay, this is the this is a guy. They had he was being attacked by the individual in question. There were two guys who were Muslims, and they were looking for a soldier to attack. And so this is something that just recently happened. This is just something last day or so. This is a Scottish individual who was attacked by these people. And notice that somebody took a picture of him. They didn't get him off, but he's sitting there trying to cut the guy's head off. His hand is bloody. They have blocked out in this picture the person, the victim's face. But he's sitting there working on cutting this guy's head off. And most of the people are doing absolutely nothing until one guy, they're all just taking pictures because they're going to put it up on their social media, I guess. One guy comes up and he's got a stick that he uses for a sport, and he knocked the guy off and stopped the attack. But typically people are just sitting around passively in this country. And if you go back to 2013, there was a deliberate murder. Two Muslims were looking for a soldier to take vengeance on. Here's the report of what happened then.
Michael Adebolajo and Michael Adebowale claimed they were soldiers of Allah, killing as part of an ongoing war. But today a jury disagreed. Fusilier Rigby was murdered in the most shocking and public way. Today his widow sobbed, along with other members of the family.
Artillery Place in Woolwich is a busy road a few minutes away from the barracks. Just after 2 o'clock on that afternoon, Michael Adebolajo and Michael Adebowale were parked up, watching and waiting for a target. Adebolajo later told police that Fusilier Rigby just so happened to be the first soldier they spotted.
At the top of the screen, on the right-hand side of the road, Fusilier Rigby is about to cross. He safely passes in front of Adebolajo's car, but it's driving straight at him. It swerves and ploughs into him. The pair climbed out of this wreckage within seconds. What followed was several minutes of barbarism. On the top left of this footage, we can't see it, but dozens of drivers and passers-by can. They are
They're just standing there looking.
His now motionless body. Moments later, in an extraordinary video captured on a mobile, Adebolajo sought to explain his actions.
They blurred out his blood-soaked hands.
We have killed this man today is because
Just walks right
Muslims
past
are dying daily.
Yeah, people were walking past him.
And this British soldier is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.
This footage shows the pair pacing around the body they've pulled into the middle of the road. An eyewitness said they were posing and smirking. When police arrive, Adebolajo charges towards them. We're not showing the moment they were shot by firearms officers, but you can hear what happened. On this video, you can see how close Adebolajo got to them, armed with a machete.
It was two individuals.
This is the parents of the victim.
It wasn't anything to do with religion. Their views are not the Islam views. It's just their private views. They're using religion as an excuse.
Yeah, that's really part of the problem, isn't it? You've been brainwashed that it's a religion of peace. The reality is that when I look at this, I think about the extremes that they go to protect from alien flora and fauna coming into a particular country. There was a story out of Australia. This guy got busted bringing in 100,000 cockroaches. And these are the big Madagascar hissing cockroaches and another large species that was there. And so they patrol that very carefully, just like they'll do with with fauna as well. And I've mentioned this before. We used to use this as an example in North Carolina with the Libertarian Party. You look at something like kudzu, which is such a nuisance. It was brought in by the American government. They thought they would use it as a rapidly growing ground cover, and yet there wasn't a natural environment to keep that under control. Same thing with hyacinths in Florida. And so when you look at what is happening, I think of it, I'll give you another example. And that was when we were in New Zealand. There was I think it was a red possum that was an endangered species in Australia because there are so many dangerous animals in Australia. It's amazing. And exactly the opposite in New Zealand. In New Zealand, everything is like the parents of that victim there. It's all, they can't defend themselves, and they're all used to living in this peaceful environment. And so when the red possum got to New Zealand, it started killing everything else, the little kiwis and everything. And so they would put up signs that would be a bounty. If you'd bring this in, they'd pay you money. Whereas in Australia, it was a protected species. And some of the people who are Australians said, this is amazing. So you can imagine if, the American bald eagle is protected in America, you can imagine if you went up to Canada and all of a sudden they've got signs, bounties for people to kill the eagles and turn their feathers in, they get paid that money. And so it's just a difference in these types, bringing in alien flora and fauna or bringing in alien cultures like that. People don't know how to respond to it. And the government has made it worse by disarming the people. But the reality is that the government wants it that way, of course. They want people coming after each other because in response to this, in response to the middle one that I talked about where the guy took out that Scottish guy and he started cutting his head off and everybody was just not really sure what they were going to do about it. You have a lot of people in Belfast are rioting. This is what it looks like. They're burning buses. They're going house to house with masks, looking for people who have come here from another country. They want to set us at war with each other because it's our government that is at war with us. And as I'm watching all of this, I see that the former Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino is now saying he's doing an exploratory committee to run for president in 2028. That's exactly what they want to drive us to, that kind of fascist approach. So we can fall off this one of two extremes. We can be like the parents who are like, oh, I don't know, this is just, that stuff like this just happens. It's basically a peaceful religion, and it's just an aberration. Or we can overreact, and we can go to the extreme that we're going to turn it into martial law, which is what Bovino would like to do. We're going to suspend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. How do we get into a middle position where we protect the borders like we would if we're looking for predatory animals that are coming in that won't fit with the existing flora and fauna that are here? I think we need to find a way in the middle of this to protect our borders and yet not do that. So as many people were looking at that and things that we had that happened in Paris, if we take a look at Paris after the riots of, and this is because a soccer game was won by their team. This is not because they've got a grievance with anything. This is just what they wanted to do. And this is a couple of weeks ago. They were burning down Paris. Somebody put up this meme of Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn. It's like, somehow I imagine Paris a little bit differently than this. She says the EU calls it cultural enrichment. Well, the question asked by some was, well, what is the libertarian solution to all this? I think the libertarian solution is that you get rid of the welfare magnet. I've said for the longest time, I like the idea of open borders. I don't want governments telling me where I can and cannot go. And of course, that was not the case in America for the longest time. But even up to the point where we had Ellis Island, there wasn't this massive welfare state that you, as long as you could get into the country, you could live off of it. I think that is a big part of the answer. I think that's most of the answer. And that was always something that I thought the Libertarian Party got wrong. You have to get rid of the welfare state. If you get rid of the welfare state, we're all better off. And it keeps a lot of this stuff from happening. It's not a perfect solution, but you can do something perhaps at the border as well. But it's primarily the welfare state. And yet they want to ramp that up. While Trump has got people like Bovino out there, getting rid of search warrants and running roughshod over people's rights and their liberties and, telling the thugs that they want to engage people on the street. While he's doing that, he's actually quadrupling the amount of money that they give for people to come into the country. So we understand that this is something that's being done by our governments throughout the West in order to undermine and to destroy our country. And there's many ways that they can do that. They can turn it into absolute chaos, as we saw in Paris, or you can have these heinous crimes that get the people who are there and treat people differently as they do in the UK with two different standards. And you can basically get them so frustrated that, as JFK said, if you make peaceful revolution impossible, you make violent revolution inevitable. They would like to see that. The government would like to see that. That's what a lot of this stuff is about. So we need to understand how they are playing us. We need to understand what their long-term objectives are. And we need to have the ability to protect ourselves. And the people in the UK are not even asking for that. That's the most amazing thing to me. That's how far down the hill they have slidden, that they don't even ask for the right to be able to self-protect themselves.
Yeah, the whole Sikh thing, it was, people call it a religious thing, but as I understand it, it's more of a cultural, historical thing where they wear the knives in honor of an event where a bunch of their women were kidnapped and they made a raid and got them back using knives like that. So now they carry it in memory of that. Well, just about every culture, actually every culture has stories similar to that one. Can't the British carry swords to remind themselves of their own great victories historically?
That's right. Well, they can't. The Scottish, as you point out, they have Scottish ceremonial daggers, but they have to be welded in, right?
Yeah, they forced the Scots to weld their ceremonial daggers into their scabbards, so they can't be drawn, but the Sikhs can carry ones that can be drawn.
Yeah, it's like there's a different standard, isn't there? And that's the thing that is really creating the unrest and the resentment that is there. Well, we are way over time, so we're going to cut it at that and just remind you that we've got a couple of great interviews coming up tomorrow. I think you're really going to enjoy them. Have a good weekend. The Common Man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity, created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.